The bell rang early. I was out talking to Johnny, and so I apologize for being late. We began to talk about conflict last week and some typical rules, not what you say, but how you say it. Not what you say, but why you say it. And the one we didn't cover last week is not what you say, but can anybody fill in the blank? Why you say it, how you say it, when you say it. And okay, I really hadn't thought about that, but we could dive off into that too. So let's talk about timing in your conversations or your conflicts. Remember, gentlemen, your ladies complain about things that they think are significantly important enough to fix. In their minds, this is good, we could make it great. This is better, we could make it best. That's the way their minds work. But ladies, remember, when you tell us stuff, we feel like failures. We're sensitive little crybabies. You know? What? That hurt my feelings. Yeah, you know. And I'm fairly secure in my ability to like myself. I don't really have any problem with my own competence or even my own company. Jackie wanted this ceiling fan. And I hate to do electrical work. I don't understand electricity. It's, you know, what sorcery is this? And I hate to get in the roof of a house. I don't like to mess with insulation. I don't like to get in for whatever reason. But I decide I'm putting this ceiling fan up for her. And I do. And it's in July because her birthday's in July. So I crawl up there, and, you know, if you don't have hair, everything that crawls on you, you feel. If there's insulation, you think it's spiders, roaches, heffalumps, woozles, all kind of stuff, you know. And I'm not going to cut off the breaker. I'm paranoid of electricity. So I go outside and, you know, shut the grid down. So not only am I putting this ceiling fan in the roof, I'm doing it in the dark with a headlamp, and you're sweating and dripping and all this. And I finally, and it's not just a thing with a blade. It's a thing with a blade and a chandelier and a cupola and a mobile. I mean, it's got, you know, it's like an inverse Christmas tree. And I put that thing together. Wired it myself. Got the switches to work so that one switch will cut the light on, one switch will cut the fan on. Sometimes that's hard to do, by the way. I had one time that I cut the switch on, nothing happened. I cut this switch on and everything in the house worked. It was really terrible. So I get this thing done, and Jackie walks in and goes, "You going to leave that gap in the ceiling?" I felt like burning the house down. Because, you know, I'd worked 17 hours, it felt like to me, hanging upside down in the rafters, you know, like a vampire bat. And there was a 1/4-inch gap between the cover plate and the roof. If you've ever doubted if I'm a master psychologist, I just proved that point right there. But yeah, so there was this gap, and you know, all I could see was the ceiling fan. All she could see was the gap, and it hurt my ego. She was correct, I was wrong. But at that point, I felt like a wounded little puppy. So remember, your ladies talk about things that they think are important to fix. But remember, ladies, your guys are super sensitive. We want brownie points. You know, it's not just enough that we do dishes. We want you to notice we did the dishes. Because it's not our job. And that's the way our poor little Neanderthal, knuckle-dragging, mouth-breathing minds think. And so it's not just what you say, but when you say it. And when, gentlemen, is the worst time to say it? Ladies and gentlemen, I've lost control of the class. If you're watching online or by the DVD, this episode does not count. It's in the metaverse. This is Temple of Doom in the Indiana Jones series. It shouldn't exist. Okay, anytime there's a vote for that. What's the worst time, fellas? The minute we walk in the door. Now again, we don't multitask. You know, a lady's been home and, she's holding the kid by the ankles. She's got a dirty diaper here. She's washing dishes with her feet. She's watching a soap opera and talking to her mom on the phone. And I walk in, and I'm single-focused. I want to get a snack. And then she goes, well, the washing machine's making a weird noise. My wife has mechanical hypochondriasis. It's just like being a hypochondriac, but it's with her car, the washing machine, the microwave, bumps in the night, the whatever. No, she's there all day with that stuff, and she's the one who uses it. The 3 times a month I run the washing machine. It sounds like it always sounds to me because I don't run it that much. So hey, something's wrong with my car, something's wrong with the microwave, something wrong. If you drop that on your husband the minute he walks in the door, what's his response? I like that. Okay. Now, I'm not saying that this is an appropriate behavior. I'm not saying I'm justified in feeling that way. I'm telling you this is the way things are, and if you know the way things work, you can be aware of it. So the other part of this discussion is understanding your spouse's enduring vulnerabilities. Now, what does that mean? What's a vulnerability? I'm sorry? A chink in their armor. Okay? Something a little less metaphorical. A weakness. Things that they're sensitive or defensive about. An insecurity. All right? So there's a vulnerability. Now, what's an enduring vulnerability? What did Jackie say? You can't mumble in my class. You've got to talk, woman. Oh, your phone's calling you. Okay, your mom's calling you? Tell her it's bad timing. It's not when you call, Connie. But anyway. So an enduring vulnerability is something that for whatever reason, our childhood, our perception, our perspective, our trauma, our insecurities, our immaturity, you know that it's there in the package. Now again, I'm not saying it's right that we are that way, but I'm saying if you know it, it's smart money to avoid it. No, because I don't really think it's a personality trait. Personality is hardwired. It's affected by genetics. It's affected some by environment, it's affected some by friends, and it's affected some by adaptation. I think there are things about the way men are wired that we're very sensitive to criticism when it comes from our spouses. Do you guys agree with that? Okay? No, you say it and you make a positive request to have your needs met at a different time. We're only talking about the timing right now. Not what you say, but when you say it. Yes. I think once you give your husband a chance to decompress, you got to. I kind of do this. I'm not wearing this hat. I'm wearing this hat now, and I think that's a good time. Or to do like you do a little kid. Hey, it's time for bed. What happens? Hey, in 5 minutes, we're going to go to bed. Or when we get this commercial. So, hey, tomorrow when you come in from work, I want us to think about addressing this. After you're sitting down watching TV, having supper, having normal, like John Gottman talks about the 5 magic hours, where you spend X number of minutes every day telling your spouse what you're going to do today. And then at the end of the day, you spend X number of minutes, 5 days a week, saying, this is what my day was like, this is what your day was like. And then you have probably 20 minutes a day showing fondness and admiration, and you probably do 2 hours a week, not at one time, but over the week, doing what they call love mapping. So, when you're spending time with your spouse, hey, what's your day like tomorrow? Well, I'm going to have this meeting. I got these clients. I got to be out of town till this time. Hey, well, when you get back in tomorrow, can you set some time or some energy aside to address the problem? Most of the time that works well for you guys, right? Because it gets on your schedule. We just don't like to walk in the door and get hit with it. Yes, ma'am. I understand that. I'm a therapist, not a miracle worker. Make an appointment, thank you. 882-9799. In case my class doesn't work for you. Yes, Lori. Yes. So now, if the enduring vulnerability cuts this way, it also cuts that way. Because how does your wife measure affection? How does your wife measure affection, gentlemen? No, that's not how she shows affection. How does she measure? Oh, you make her food. Very nice. Okay. That's part of it. It is different for everybody. But if you attune to her needs or her wants, needs met. Okay? And those needs are measured in crisis, day-to-day crisis. Well, if I was important to you, you'd know this bothers me. If I were important to you, you'd know that this machine was making this noise. If I were important to you, you'd anticipate that my oil needed changing. If I were important to you, you'd know that this bothers me about the lights, the ceiling fan, the house, my car. The guy who invented the tire sensor on a car needs to be murdered. He needs to be taken outside and beat with a copperhead wrapped in barbed wire. Okay? Because I drove cars for years that had substandard tires, and I never got a light on. I drove them back and forth. And now the temperature changes, and boop, something's wrong catastrophically with your tire. No, it's not. The air's cold, you moron. And I drive it 5 miles, it'll go away. But Jackie sees that light on, and she's a gadget girl. Guess what she tells you? Hey, something wrong with my car. I need new tires. Yeah, but if I don't go out there and address it, put a air pressure check on it, or take it down to the Quickie Rippy and put quarters in the machine and fill it up, she thinks I've ignored something that's important to her. So timing is everything. Ladies, it's not what you say, but when you say it. And gentlemen, it's not how important it is to you, but it's how important it is to her. And so both of these things, I'm not saying it's correct. I'm saying that's the way the mechanism works. And if you understand the phenomenon of the mechanism, you're smart to pay attention to that. Peter says, husbands, likewise, dwell with your wives with understanding. Now, what does that mean? No. Yes. It basically means being able to demonstrate that you understand their world from their perspective. Not that you find it reasonable, not that you find it rational, not that you agree with it, but you go, this is important to my wife, I'm going to do that. That make sense? Okay, so, and I'm not trying to earn points or brag on myself, but my wife said, hey, my mom's coming in for Thanksgiving, your mom and dad are coming in for Thanksgiving. We need a handrail in our garage. We need to build something so they can grab something and walk up the 2 steps that enter our house, because I don't want to be the person I don't want to be at our house where they broke their hip. So we do this little construction project last night. Well, in order to burn the wood and in order to drill through the concrete to put this banister in, I moved her car out. And so we did our little project, and I don't remember the sequence of events, but I was going to leave to go to work or go somewhere, and it was raining. And I just decided to put her car back in the garage so she wouldn't have to walk out in the rain to get it. Well, I got like this text that I have like Superman. You are so sweet. I can't believe you're so thoughtful and moved my car in. I hate to confess this, I couldn't back my truck up with her car where it was. And she's here. And so, okay, I could have wiggled through it, honey. I could have been, but I put her car in the garage, and it was just, in her mind, it was thoughtfulness. That, oh, wow. Now, I wouldn't have thought it was a big deal, but I don't park my car in the garage. My garage is open so I can have a workout place. And so my truck doesn't park there. She parks her car inside and never has to defrost any windows. It's not a big deal for me to walk out in the rain or in the frost or whatever, but just a simple fact of moving her car less than 15 feet, it was like, wow, that was cool that you did that for me. Pardon? Yeah, go out and start when it's cold, that kind of stuff. So we're talking, that's attunement. So not only is it, ladies, your timing to bring these things up, but gentlemen, it's your timing for addressing these things with rapidity. Because they measure, hey, he cares about this, 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 and this, but this is not important to him, therefore I'm not important to him. Do you agree with that, ladies? A lot of head nods in the room. Okay? Am I right, honey? Sorry, I'm in trouble. We drove separate because I had SWAT practice tonight. So she'll cool off way before we get home. All right. So the other part of that is I mentioned love mapping. And this goes back into understanding your spouse's perspective. Now this cuts both ways, husbands and wives, wives and husbands. And remember we talked about the mirror neurons, that when David wrote the 23rd Psalm, he's writing not from the perspective of a shepherd, but from the perspective of a sheep. As a sheep, the Lord understands my needs, my wants, my vulnerabilities, my insecurities, and what did the great shepherd king do for the sheep? He attuned to those needs and addressed them. And David goes down individually all those vulnerabilities of a sheep. So when you start talking about this conflict resolution, one of the things that helps you avoid these enduring vulnerabilities is this thing that we call love mapping. And here's the definition for love mapping. An intimate familiarity of one another's world. It's a richly detailed love map. Now, what does that mean? What's an intimate familiarity of the other person's world?
You have to communicate. You have to ask questions and listen to answers and know how their day flows, who their friends are, what their interests are, what they're doing.
So you hear these details? It's about talking, it's about listening, it's about asking questions. And it's intimate details. This is the part of your brain where you store all the relevant information about your spouse's life. You remember their major events. You remember things that are big T traumas, little T traumas, and the trivia. This is where, hey, what's their favorite color? What's their favorite food? What's their favorite movie? What's their favorite music? What's their favorite place? Their favorite place to eat? Their favorite activity to do? All those things that if you're not paying attention as you get older, we move into our own comfort zone. That, hey, I've worked all day or I've traveled all week and I come in and I want to stay home. Well, she may have been home all day with little ones and wants to go somewhere. Or it's the holidays and I want to stay around the house and hunt. Well, I want to go see my mom. And it's understanding your spouse's perspective, understanding their major life events, remembering, hey, this is the time of year when that happened, or this is a major trauma, or this is a minor trauma. We talk about big T and little t trauma. And it's also understanding the trivia. It's understanding just the things that you just know about your spouse. That is important. There's a movie, and I don't like romantic comedies. They give me anxiety. I'd rather watch, people get murdered and eaten by dragons and zombies and stuff, because there's that point in the romantic comedy where there's that miscommunication, and I have to leave the room. I can't deal with it. It feels like work. I'm like, you idiot! That's not what she said. And you're jumping to a. Oh, you ask Jackie. I get apoplectic. I just can't. But I did watch like some movie, Stomp the Yard, or something like this. And there's a guy, and I mean, he's on scholarship, and he's rich, and he's got a pedigree. And then there's this other kid, and he likes this same girl, and she's basically tutoring him in math. You know, he's a loser and a failure, and she's supposed to be with this guy, but she's spending time with this guy, and the thing that breaks the bank is this guy knows what color her eyes are. You know, he's sitting around being tutored in math, and he goes, well, it's hard to concentrate on algebra when I stare into those blue eyes. And she walks up to, you know, the heir apparent, and she says, what color are my eyes? He goes, what kind of stupid question is that? Well, you watch the ship sink. You should have seen Adriana's face. She rolled those eyes. Oh, yeah. And so, do you understand the trivia about your spouse? Do you understand those little things? Going back to husbands, dwell with your wives with understanding. Go back to the idea that Jesus as God took on flesh so he could understand our perspective. Well, if that's what God would do to build a relationship with us, what should we do to build a relationship with each other? So understanding the love map, and that part of that love map is not just the major life events and the big T trauma, the little T trauma, and the trivia, but it's also understanding those things that are enduring vulnerabilities and understanding their love language. Because if I say I love you in a way that you don't perceive, I really didn't say it. Agree with that? Questions or comments about the enduring vulnerabilities, the timing thing, and love mapping? Did it define love mapping well enough? So if you've got a smartphone, you can find the Gottman app, Gottman, and for 99 cents you can download the love mapping game. And it's basically a series of questions that are true or false. I can name you my spouse's favorite vacation place. True. The newlywed game, yeah. And so you can take that and find out, hey, here's some things I can't answer yes. That's a conversation you have with your spouse. You go, hey, I don't know this about you, or I don't remember this about you. And it's a really fun thing to do. I do it a lot in therapy. Just have couples say, okay, you guys are not getting along. You don't feel like you're friends. Well, how well do you know your friends? Well, how well do you know your spouse? And so I do the love mapping thing all the time with folks. And then it creates a lot of good conversations. And I think it's 25 questions and they're true false. My spouse's favorite vacation spot. If my spouse could have her dream vacation. This is my spouse's best friend, worst enemy. This is the least favorite relative my spouse has. All kind of stuff that you probably should know about your spouse. And it's called love mapping by John Gottman. Second thing that happens when we talk about interacting with each other and this love mapping is building fondness and admiration. Now, in the 5 magic hours, I think it's 20 minutes a week or 20 minutes a day that you build fondness and admiration. And it's basically communicating things to your spouse that are positive rather than negative. And measuring fondness and admiration in a couple is a very good way to predict divorce. Because the absence of fondness and admiration means that all those things, celebrations and satisfaction and harmony and peace and us, get replaced by resentment, disappointment, regret. And then you get what we call negative sentiment override. And so if we're not attuned to what's good for each other and what each other likes, then we can't build fondness and admiration. The best test of whether a couple still has a functioning fondness and admiration system is how they view their past. So let me read that again. The best test of whether a couple still has a functioning fondness and admiration system is how they view their past. Now, why would that matter? What are the key things that they remember? Are they positive things or negative things? Okay, so you view the relationship of the past as positive. You expect that to continue?
When you're trying to remember the past, a lot of times you remember the big points. You don't remember a lot of the fillers. So
And memory can be selective. If I'm looking for reasons to be happy, I could probably find reasons to be happy. If I'm looking for reasons to be unhappy, what do I come up with? So it's not just what you remember, but are you intentionally looking for the bad or intentionally looking for the good? Now, does that sound like it's too obvious? You know, when couples come to me and start talking about things that aren't working, I don't think there's a lot of value in that. I think it's really more important to talk about how we handle the things that aren't working rather than just telling on me. I'm not the principal. You don't come to my office because you're in trouble, okay? But couples want to come in and tell on each other. Well, guess what that tells me about how they view the past? So I go, hey, let's go back and tell me about a time when you were happy. And then somebody says, well, we've fought so long I can't remember being happy. How actually right is that statement? I mean, if you've been in a relationship with a person and can't ever remember being happy, then why did you get married? Now, you know, if he was a jerk the whole time and you went ahead and married him, you know, that's a special kind of stupid right there. But none of that is ever true, because when you get into a positive spin on your history, you get a positive spin on your future. A negative spin on your history does what for your future? Yes, Kathy says. It puts a negative spin on it. And then that creates what Buellman wrote about when he wrote about negative sentiment override. So you have a sentiment, a feeling, an emotional feeling that is linked to negativity, negative sentiment, and it overrides all the good memories in the past, and it actually overrides the good things in the present. Philippians 4:8, what does it say? Somebody read that out loud. Finally, my brethren, whatsoever things are
true, whatsoever things are noble, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report. If there's any virtue, if there's any praiseworthy, meditate on these things.
What does the apostle tell the church at Philippi to occupy their thoughts with? Now, what happens if you sat down and wrote out the list of the good, right, true, noble things that are virtuous, things that are praiseworthy about your marriage? Now, you could do the same thing with the things that are bad and come up with a dumpster fire. But intentional thoughts of, these are the things that I'm happy with, these are the things that I'm satisfied with, these are the things that are good for us, what would that do in avoiding the negative sentiment override? And I really do think that sometimes happiness is intentional. We have a sign in one of our rooms that says, choose happiness. And that's not a sign I put in the house. It's a sign Jackie put in the house. And it was just simply, I get to choose whether I let this moment define who I am and how I feel. Or I can choose to be happy. And everybody's got stuff to complain about. Everybody's got things that didn't go well. Everybody's got things that aren't right. Everybody's got things that are suboptimal. But I also have an incredible amount of blessings. And it really depends on what you choose. And the ratio of positive to negative, 5 positives to every 1 negative to avoid a negative sentiment override. Now just think about, when you think of the story of us, are you really doing an overwhelming amount of positive to a very little negative? A 5-to-1 ratio of positive to negative. Would you believe that that ratio is that influential on whether a couple stays together or not? Now, if you know that, and you can be intentional about it, and again, I'm not talking about, rainbow unicorn glasses, and I'm not talking about an unrealistic filter, but looking for things to celebrate rather than for things to be disappointed about. Looking for things to be satisfied with rather than for things to regret. And so when I start thinking about the story of us, I look at my past and I purposely dig out, hey, these were good times. This is when we dated. This is why we dated. This is how we dated. This is what made me fall in love with this person. And reminding myself of why I'm involved with my spouse allows me to overlook some of the things that my spouse may have degraded into or grown out of or changed with. Does that sound too simplistic? Yes, no, feedback? I'm getting some stunned looks. What was that? It sounds reasonable. And I think it is reasonable. And I think sometimes I think we wait for some epiphanal moment to suddenly make us, quote unquote, fall back in love. Love is an attitude more than it is an emotion.
I think that what you're talking about is a sign of not just a healthy marriage, but a mature marriage where you've gotten to the point where you appreciate the positives about your spouse without expecting them to be perfect. You have two humans, so no one is perfect. So keeping that list of these are your positive attributes. So then when a negative attribute is shown, and you say, okay, well, this is a negative attribute, but they have these other redeeming qualities, and not expecting them to be perfect.
So Jennifer says, camping out on the things that are working without expecting them to be perfect helps you erase or overlook or even cope with the things that are negative. If you understand fondness and admiration, and you can apply it on a daily basis, it is the antidote for contempt. And I like the fact that in the material that it says antidote for contempt, because contempt is a poison. And you deal with another person who is feeding you on a regular basis contempt. It is poisonous to the relationships, because if you have a 5-to-1 positive and negative ratio, but that were to change to 5-to-5 or 3-to-5, that marriage is doomed. When you use the dimpler muscle, that's when you smile but only one side of your mouth. Okay? That's a sign of contempt. So there's this guy that studied facial expressions in the human population. And facial expressions of the human population are ubiquitous across the planet. Every culture in the world does the surrender cobra when they see things bad. Doesn't have to be just on a football game. Every culture in the world celebrates like this. This guy that did this study, I think it's Aikman, could sit down and watch a silent film of a Stone Age tribe from Papua New Guinea and say, hey, these people are nice and they love their children. These people are cannibalistic and homosexual. And they had these ritualistic, domineering practices where they did male domination on each other. And he could tell that by their facial expressions. So in some of the early Gottman work, he gives his students a round head with eyes and a nose, and they count facial expressions. And by the way, what you do with your face affects your health. When these guys were studying facial expressions, they had to operate these specific muscles to frown. And you can't do that until you have the emotion of sadness. You can't make yourself frown in this particular way. And so they put these neurostimulators in to make their mouths contract like that. They did it for a week and a half, and during that week and a half when their mouths were doing that, both the guys got sick. But it wasn't the flu, it was just they got sick, physically sick from having their faces contort like that. Really, really weird stuff, okay? The dimpler muscle, if I can count that dimpler muscle X amount of times in a 1-hour conversation in my office, I can predict heart disease in the spouse. If I've got a woman in the office who's given him X number of times in an hour session, I can predict heart disease in your husband by whether or not he's having to live with perpetual contempt in your house. Contempt is the poison that kills relationships, because contempt starts the cascade into negativity. Contempt, defensiveness, negativity, and stonewalling. So when you start practicing fondness and admiration, you're erasing contempt. And then if there's something that I need you to fix, I need you to work on, or I need you to address it, because of fondness and admiration, I ask for my needs to be met with a positive request. The positive request to have my needs met doesn't attack the person, it addresses the problem. And a lot of times our spouses, males and females, feel attacked when somebody talks about something they're unhappy with and it sounds like a criticism rather than a complaint. Does that make sense? Okay, so and Jackie never fusses at me about hunting, but let's suppose she did. She could say, "You're never home." Or she could say, "I wish we spent more time together." Are we talking about the same topic? Same subject. One of those starts a conversation, one of those starts whatever. I could be defensive, or I could be mad, or I could have my feelings hurt, or I could quit hunting and be resentful. Remember, when you do things to meet your spouse's needs, it's got to be giving. You're not giving in, you're not giving up. You're just giving. Giving in, giving up, scorekeeping. Just giving is an act of love, affection, fondness, and admiration. So when you start talking about dealing with each other, some of the antidotes for conflict is love mapping, and then number 2, fondness and admiration. And I ended on the bell. I'm a trained professional. All right, next week is Thanksgiving Eve. We'll have a Devo and a Thanksgiving service in the auditorium.